Today, we have an opportunity to talk about our union's founding father and recent Hall of Fame inductee in Marvin Miller. The opportunity to talk about the beginning, what Marvin believed in and preached, the honoring and respecting of the players who sacrificed on behalf of the next generation, as well as a commitment to leaving the game better for those who come after us.
Today we have a panel of gentlemen that will help you understand the true impact of Marvin Miller. They had made dramatic strides from the first day he stepped on board in 1966 to when he left in 1982. Steve, you came to the big leagues for the first time in 1973. Can you relate your thoughts when you first had contact with Marvin Miller?
I have a visual image of Marvin standing in the middle of Montreal Expos in Daytona Beach. And he always had a little piece of paper with little tiny writing on it. Those were his notes. He never once ever looked at them, but he had them there in his hand.
I asked him, did he ever use the notes? And he said, well, he pretty much remembered them. He said, simply the fact of writing them down sort of imprinted them on his brain, so he didn't need to check back with it. Also, I think a couple of people talked about how quiet Marvin's approach was when he was discussing, negotiating.
When he was trying to make a point, he would lower his voice. And I will tell you, that circle got closer and closer and closer to Marvin out there in center field, because he wanted everyone to be that close and have the knowledge that he was imparting.
One of Marvin's favorite singers was Frank Sinatra. And Sinatra once said that when he had an unruly audience, he would sing softer. And it would get people to pay attention and everyone else to say, shh, shh, quiet, And that was his inspiration for talking so softly.
So in 1980, I know he created the first negotiating committee, and he took the two league reps and the two player reps from each league. And the four of us were kind of his player negotiating group. And that was the first time being in the room.
Well, I can remember many times involved in negotiation sessions when the other side of the table was very animate and they were pounding the fist, and Marvin would step back and just kind of calmly say, well, let's look at it from a different perspective. And I know, Dave, you were in a lot of those negotiating meetings, and would you reflect on his style of negotiating?
I don't recall him ever standing up, pounding a table or anything like that, or raise his voice, but players would. It was a style that enabled players coming from really nothing to all hands on deck and everyone giving input. He allowed that, he promoted it, and that's what we did. It was more of a democratic approach more than an autocratic approach, saying this is the way it is. He would listen to each and every player.
The players were the game, but we never understood that until Marvin was able to explain that to us.
The owners would speak as if they weren't in the room and tell our side what players thought and what they needed and what they could or couldn't have. And that would always elicit an immediate response, which is exactly why the players were in the room to begin with.
I can remember specifically a negotiating session in Phoenix with Chubb Feeney across the table, National League president, and many of their lawyers, of course. And it got to the point where we were stonewalled. And Marvin just got up and said, players, you take it from here. And he walked out of the room. And the owners and the negotiators on the owner's side were flabbergasted because they didn't think anybody could handle it. But there were several players there that just stepped right up, picked up things like, because Marvin had prepared everybody so well. And Alan, I'll ask you, as far as when you got to that point in the book, talking about how he empowered the players, what did Marvin think the significance of that was? Was it truly something that was going to turn the tide in the players' side when the owners understood that the players were indeed united in these fights?
Marvin thought that once the players became, can I use the term woke? That's what the union needed. That would be what supercharged everything. He told me that Willie Stargell, he would bring Willie to the meetings, and once Stargell told him, he said, these guys make me so mad. He says, I just want to speak up and say something. And Marvin said, well, Willie, that might have a good effect. Go ahead. Go in there and talk. And he said it did. He said, when Willie Stargell came in there and spoke his mind, they all stood up straight. I mean, they sat up straight and listened to what he had to say.
It was my turn to speak up too. And it's time to talk. And at that point, I was the highest paid guy in the game. And so, in the media, not only in the meeting, but also with the media, they might say, you might make a comment on that, because the media would ask, Dave, what are you guys going to do? I say, we're all walking out until we get this settled. And, they look at you, if you're the highest paid guy in the game and you're not even going to think twice about, not returning to work and until we resolve this issue, everybody else should listen as well. So, but I remember a couple of times that I had to stand up, and others like a Don Baylor or a Reggie Jackson or these guys would stand up, and people would, let me listen.
I remember Reggie Smith and Bobby Grich and guys like that would get up and voice their opinion. And these were the stars like yourself of the game. And this is something too that Marvin empowered us with. When we used to sign contracts, the general manager would say, listen, I'm going to sign you to this contract, but don't tell anybody because you're the highest paid catcher on our team. But Marvin would say, that's a bunch of bunk. You know what? And I'd walk out of the room thinking, wow, I got to get a contract, and find out years later that I was the lowest paid catcher on the team, but the general manager wouldn't tell anybody else. And that's something that Marvin brought out. And I think that had a lot to do with everybody stepping up, because you remember early on, nobody knew what anybody made on the team. So the owners could tell you anything, but I think that was something that Marvin said, hey, this is something that you have to know if we're going to grow as a union. And I thought that was a big step in the right direction as well.
I learned early on that I wanted to know what was going on, because you looked at it like I was the CEO or the president or whatever in my own life, and I needed to know the business part of my life, and the Players Association provided that.
Every player was going to be affected by the collective bargaining agreement that was put in place, and that needed to be a fair agreement for everybody involved. Now, and he absolutely demanded that fairness be the cornerstone of the basic agreement. And then you got to fight to make sure that it, you protect it and you let it grow.
In your discussion with Marvin, how important did he feel like the unity of the players was to the strength of the union? How important was it to maintain that unity across the board for the association to maintain a grip on what they wanted to accomplish in negotiations?
That was all important. That's exactly what he was there to do, and he didn't really feel that his work was bearing fruit until he saw the players react like that.
Participate in something as great as the Players Association has become. Starting from a place, as I said, of inertia. We weren't going anywhere. We were stuck, and we needed leadership. We needed direction. It came about. Marvin was the right guy at the right time.
If you can get a foundation principle such as fairness, and know that every single player is connected with every other player through the basic agreement, and once you realize that you're all connected, then you can be unified through knowledge.
Their concern was the pension. And Marvin at that time was so aware that there were so many more things to be concerned about. Playing conditions. I mean, players nowadays have no idea what fields were like when we started playing. Yankee Stadium in Cleveland and Detroit and all those players, now they're all the same. they're pristine. But Marvin put padding on the walls. There were nails coming out of the fence in Arlington Stadium. There were all kinds of safety issues that Marvin was aware of that we never thought of as players. Or we couldn't do anything about that, but Marvin understood that.
He was astute, he was competent, he was experienced, and he was visionary, he was honest, and he would share this information with the players. Again, we started from a period, a standstill. We didn't know what we didn't know. And if we have vision looking backwards, how great the things he was able to do when it came to communication and education.
Marvin had a big picture outlook. He knew where TV was going. He knew where the World Series was going. He knew what the pension was going to take. And I think as we got more knowledge and he passed it along, giving us the options of the owners are making this much and you're only getting this much and you should be getting X. Don't you think that he did such a wonderful job of educating us to allow us to make those great decisions and stay together? Of all the accomplishments that Marvin had, the pension, the arbitration, the shares of the World Series revenues and all that, what do you think was the most impactful thing that Marvin accomplished?
It was the combination effect of salary arbitration and free agency impacted the salary structure probably, he said, 5 or 10 times faster than just free agency itself would have. So again, it was the combination of all the things he did and the impact that it had on the industry. I believe that it's in place now. I believe that it has grown over the years. I don't think it's stagnant and we were the only ones that had it back then. I think it started the process, and I believe today the process is fully engaged. And I would ask every player to recognize that he is linked with every other player through the basic agreement.
We now have the benefit of seeing the connected dots, the straight line from what Marvin helped us create until today. And you have to think about the thousands of players and their families that are benefiting directly today from the actions that were taken back then.
Dave, I think the big thing too was that we had such a undying trust in Marvin Miller that he gave us the information, we made the decisions, but we trusted that he was giving us everything to the best of his knowledge, the information that was best for us, and we made the decisions. But I think that trust was imperative for the success of the association.
And it was the right brew, it was the right mix, it was the right time, it was the right man. And we've accomplished a lot over time. And we didn't know that was the beginning of history, you know, I mean, a real, true, positive history of this organization, but it was. I am so glad that Marvin is going in now. He deserved to be there, and I hope he's looking down and accepts this with grace.